pretty cool. There's tons of questions that I could ask, but I'm really so if you have a question, say your name, stand up. Bring it, Ronnie.
I saw the outline.
Who saw the big on Shane's
Okay, you tried all these drugs. Which one do you like? Or where would you go? Yeah, rating. Yeah, I want a rating scheme.
It's so context dependent. What's my favorite? So mushrooms are kind of an all-time favorite. I think it may be just because they were the first one that I had, and it was whatever few of them that I had at that time made me the most comfortable with them, and so on, and so that I just got like so experienced and kind of gained more mastery over that. Where it probably, who knows? It could have been any substance. There's in the ketamine data, it shows that the people that have the most benefit in the ketamine treatment, it seems to be pretty effective for a fair amount of people. But even if like, which is to say, like even if like something like 60% of people, maybe less than that, ketamine have experienced like real change, that's incredibly significant. Even if it only works for half the people, but I think the data shows that it has a higher likelihood of being beneficial if it's your first psychedelic experience, if you've never done any other psychedelic. And I bet that's probably the case with every psychedelic, because there's just something about having that first experience. And mushrooms just happen to be mine. I still to this day fucking love mushrooms. But like I'm at a festival trying to tolerate a jam band acid, maybe for a few days. I know I'm not going to get to nap and stuff. Ketamine is the only psychedelic that I'll do like pretty willy-nilly. Like I would do ketamine tonight. I would be like, oh yeah, sure. And it's just, whereas most psychedelics I'm not as spontaneous as that. DMT is the most fascinating psychedelic that I've ever done. 5-MeO DMT, which is deceptive because it's very different. It's the only thing similar about it is the DMT.
The frog.
That's the frog. And I have very little experience with that, but I had one time. The first time that I did it was multiple times in the same day. Ramping up, it was the best experience that I ever, like I was like a changed, I've never been like my perfect self like that for like, it's like 3 weeks straight. Of course it didn't last, but like for about 3 weeks I was my absolute perfect. I was just in a flow state, not manic, not anything, just no mental barriers, full acceptance of everything, and just like moving forward in life in the most amazing, perfect way. And then I did a larger experience with it, and it's the most amount of hellish suffering I've ever experienced. It was like, maybe I'll tell people about it one day, but I don't even want to like scare people. It was like so fucking hellish. And so like context is so dependent. Like I don't know what my favorite is. I hated MDMA in my early years because it was like this party drug, and you'd like drink with some friends and do MDMA and stuff. And like it's not that it didn't like feel good, but there's also like it's just like the speediness of it, and like the party drug vibe, which is never really what I've been after with this psychedelic experience, if MDMA is a psychedelic. And then I did MDMA with, like in a relationship some decade later. I'm like, oh, this is the perfect context. And MDA, which is similar, is fantastic. So that's impossible. I'm not gonna do some psychedelic Sophie's Choice situation. Yeah.
You heard anything about ibogaine or how they're using it? Kind of use your make.
Yeah, I was supposed to do Ibogaine in the documentary. It was actually before I lost my mind. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that got cut short. I can't believe the documentary that we were able to finish. But like certainly, if I would have been involved, the sensibility, like I couldn't be involved in the editing process very well. Like even the voiceovers and stuff, I would have to like muster the periods of time in the day that I like had a lick of sanity and try to like record like the voiceover. That's what like I can hear it. It's like contrived and everything. That was like mostly like written for me. But it like there was there were with it, so there's so much stuff that we had planned that we didn't get a chance to because of what happened. But Ibogaine was there's a fantastic clinic in Mexico that just like eventually shut their doors before I was going to go down there because they were between the cartel and the police like pushing them for bribes and such. They were just like, we just can't afford it. So I still haven't done Ibogaine. It's during that time, Rick Doblin, the founder of the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, in there, we had a chat one day. Rick and I used to talk all the time. I'd often call him from stage during tours and stuff. And so at one point I was like, Rick, I'm thinking about doing Ibogaine, but I don't know. I've heard it can be like a 12-hour nightmare. And he's like, oh no, it can be much longer than that. So no, I actually, someone just told me about it yesterday that it's, what can I get?
Well, we need to be raising our voices. The governor of Kentucky is speaking out against Ibogaine in Kentucky. The money that would be allotted to Ibogaine, the $42 million, is a fraction of the $900 million. So we all need to be writing our legislature, writing our governor, and saying, adopt this. The committee is pretty much vote to pass it, but from what I understand, talking to committee members, even if it passes, it's far from one. So we would really do well to speak up for this. It's something Sanctuary members, I've been looking at writing a kind of a template email that we could send out, and then you could kind of just fill in your specific information so we could send out as a group. But yeah, we're still very deep in the advocacy phase here.
Some of these words might be above some of us.
Ibogaine, yeah.
Ibogaine is an exceedingly, it's, in my mind, as someone who hasn't done it, it's an exceedingly intense, sometimes very dark, psychedelic experience that seems to, often people describe the first half of it as being like a stern father figure disciplining you, and then the second half of you like forgiving yourself or whatever. And it seems to have a reset quality that's able to break people of addiction, which in places like this, there's like and I wish I could remember his name. I had a guest on my podcast that wrote a whole book about how meth took off so much in the Appalachia region, and it's fascinating, like how that all happened. But yeah, I mean, it actually does seem like a suitable place for benefit.
So you know, I came up and introduced myself earlier. I'm a psychiatrist, and so I am so excited about all the trials and you know, everything, because what we've been doing hasn't been working. I did inpatient psych for 4 years, and by the end, like, I was so depressed, I thought I'd wasted my life, because all I was seeing was trauma, poverty, and no resources, and all we could do is keep someone for a couple days and throw pills at them, and pills do not fix trauma, poverty, and no resources. And so, you know, it was just, anyways, now I'm doing something completely different. I'm doing collaborative integrative care. I am making sure that people get proper diagnoses, get proper treatment, try to find them real therapists who do, you know, trauma-based CBT, not just talk therapy, which is just counseling. That doesn't change anything. That doesn't change the way you think. And you know what, we just started doing some of the esketamine treatments, you know, who really, a lot of treatment resistant depression is actually chronic PTSD, because people with chronic PTSD have chronic dysthymia, which is basically a chronic low mood. So a lot of these people get misdiagnosed with major depression. It's not major depression, that is episodic. You are so depressed you don't function for, you know, weeks to months, and then you're good for a long period of time. And people with chronic PTSD have chronic low mood. They say they've been depressed their whole life. No medicine has ever helped, you know. And so we've had some of our chronic complex PTSD patients doing esketamine. It's like they just look like different people. It's amazing. And it's because the ketamine has to be specifically given like a certain way. What it does is it increases the nerve growth factor in your brain, so you really are like growing new connections.
Yeah.
And
Is there a question?
I know, I just like I was so excited about it.
Oh yeah.
No, but then I was gonna ask, you know, my other part was I've seen manic episodes, I've seen antidepressants induced mania, you know, SSRI induced mania, I've seen amphetamine induced mania, I have seen, you know, all kinds of stuff, but I actually have never seen anyone come in with psychedelic induced mania.
Really?
You know, yes, all my years of practicing, you know, being in the emergency psych room, I have never had anybody come in using LSD or mushrooms or anything like that and end up in my psych ER.
Wow. Well, I've always considered myself a bit of an outlier. I know when I broke both of my heels, so a lot of people were like, "Whoa, we've never seen that before." I just tend to push it a little bit.
We do have a couple questions from the live stream. I'd love to get to here.
Sorry, what was there?
Oh, no. It's fine, but anyway.
Yeah,
And I'll
yeah.
be at the Sunshine.
Awesome, wonderful.
What'd you get there, Courtney?
Yeah, I was gonna see if Carolyn wanted to ask live, but I'm not sure if she saw my message, so I'll just read her question. Shane, what songs are on your playlist for an ideal trip?
Depends on the substance. I used to, and I still can be, I suppose. I used to be like a cliche Pink Floyd person way back when. Here's a fun thing. You don't need to be tripping, but just put whatever playlist on with like Animal Planet, like a David Attenborough documentary on mute, but like whatever playlist you like on. And then you'll see how like quickly the brain makes presumptions about things and can be influenced by different sensory information. So if you'll like if you have like Jimmy Buffett on or whatever, and you have people over there, oh man, whew, wish I had it easy like these animals. And then you put something dark like Pink Floyd The Wall or something on. Is anything going to blink? Is it going to go extinct? I have a playlist for ketamine that I use let's see, if you go to, I referenced the list in the Comedy Central Tales from the Trip video about ketamine, and they pinned a comment of mine with that playlist on YouTube, and that's what I use for ketamine, and I have it planned out based on it, based on the ebbs and flows of how I like to do a large ketamine dose and then come down from it and do a second large one again. Second one's really the magic one, if you ask me. Third one, not so much. Now you're chasing the dragon. But that second one, there's something about it. And so it's like what is like dirt wire is in there, like tipper, they're familiar, so like cliche psychedelic trance music. Yeah.
What was it like emotionally going through these different, psychedelic drugs during this docu-series? Like, did you get,
Emotionally.
yeah, like, did you,
The drugs were
like, what was the
fine.
timeline like?
Oh, everything was going great. It was that like I first started doing psychedelics for like specifically for the documentary in like March or April of 2017, and I was just like I always get depressed when there's kind of like fogginess and ambiguity, but path forward. I think depression, in some circumstances, it evolved as or is somewhat applied as an evolved tool that makes you pump the brakes on action before dumping a lot of energy toward a wrong path. So you overanalyze things so you don't spend 5 years down the wrong path or whatever. So it inhibits action as you kind of ruminate and move through different scenarios. And that's like so beyond useful, and it becomes so problematic in many of our modern cases in modern world. And so I thought, mushrooms always helped me with that. They would be like a little inspiring. They kind of get me out of that. They would illuminate like kind of a path forward for me often, with like an awareness of like, oh, well, in the back of my mind, I'm like, this may be just an arbitrary path forward, but at least I'm moving again. And so during the documentary, I was like, oh, I'll use it for that, and I'll document that. And then like because I was in depression at the time, and then once I was out of the depression, I was like, well, why stop at not being depressed? Like, why not like feel good? And then like, could that happen? And so I just kept on gobbling mushrooms a few times a week, and then I felt good. And then I was like, man, I wonder if I could feel great. And so I kept eating mushrooms and doing more psychedelics, mostly mushrooms stuff. And then I felt great. And I remember I was thinking like, well, what is after great? What's that? Just feeling great all the time. And I'll regret that choice for the rest of my life. You don't ever need to know what's that. If you're ever feeling great, just leave that alone. Be happy with that. You don't need to touch that. And so it was actually like I was in a hyper elevated, like very good mood. until, and then, and so in hindsight, of course, I was like already hypomanic and everything, but it was the ayahuasca that then triggered the first, like real, now I'm like in a full-blown manic state that I'd never experienced that before. And then the week later when I went to that concert and piled some more mushrooms on top of that, that was when things like really broke down in my mind. So yeah, wouldn't advise that. But it was a lot of fun up until my mind broke. So now I have to, like, anytime I'm happy or feeling too good, I have to be like, is this problematic? And I have like signals and things, because it's happened enough since that now I know if I experience X amount of synchronicities, or if they're of like this kind of intensity, that I need to be wary of that. Where a lot of people get to float through life being like, "Whoa, synchronicity! Thanks, universe, looking out for me." If I experience anything like that, I'm like, "Uh-oh, is this the start of like never-ending synchronicities ramping up and things becoming me like losing?" Any kind of sense of what's real.
How do you regulate that? How do you, when you see that coming, what do you do?
Well, I mean, the last time that it happened was just it was at the beginning of COVID, extreme stress, and kind of like lost everything and all this. And yeah, and I mean, that was my next trip to the psych ward. I had some close calls, but it's a whole long story. And then but that time I went to the psych ward. I wasn't medicated or anything, and that wasn't caused by psychedelics. That was just stress, but it was as intensely delusional. I just kind of like finally accepted the state that I was in, and was like, you know what, I'm just going to like observe this with curiosity. I'm going to, first I was like, I might not be in a psych ward for very long. Like the last time I was in, they let me out, shockingly enough. And I was like, so I'll just like view this as like an anthropologist or a journalist or something like that. And then it was once I like got fully okay with like, no, I might be in a psych ward for the rest of my life. There's some sort of release and accepting of that made me. And then I just started cueing into other people's behavior, like what we just write off as being crazy. I started seeing like enhanced cognitive biases, just like one of my favorite subjects, which is the predictable ways in which a brain can err. And I started noticing into others, and then I remembered like one of the biggest cognitive biases, which is this objectivity illusion, which is that it's easier to see the faults in other people's logic than it is your own. And once I remembered that, I was like, oh, this is actually what I've been doing. And so it was just kind of like easier. It was actually beneficial being in a psych ward, seeing people that were like, had been crazier for longer, were more well versed in being crazy, and the ways in which they behave. Like, oh, that's the errors in which they're, and there was something that helped me just like walk back stuff in my brain and like catch things and create space between taking action. And so, yeah, I don't know. I'm not like, I'm out of the woods. That's never going to happen again. But feel all right now. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, I've been in the church here for about a year, and I feel like there's so much support in saying, set and setting and integration. And so when I hear the story of this episode for you, and you talked about clandestine meeting, so do you see, like, can we see as like a lesson that we do have the support and the dosage and all that I've been learning about this, that what we do here. So does that seem important for me to see that in what you experienced?
Yeah, I mean, our lessons of dosage and proper like setting and things important.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, that seems like a major thing in your life, this manic episode. You know, like that was new, right? That didn't happen after all these years of.
Yeah, I mean that was you know, from the point of view of a documentary, that was like quite beneficial thing to happen when you happen to like go documenting this one thing and then this really peculiar thing goes like horribly unexpectedly wrong or right if you're making a documentary. And so I mean it was, that's more how that came, that for all of the ideas of what we thought the documentary was going to be when we started making it, we had absolutely no idea. Like no one would have been on board with like, let's shoot a documentary about me losing my mind. That was never like in any of the brainstorms or anything. But yeah, I mean, I think the nice thing about it was that like one of the things that we were thinking about along the way was, how do we make sure we aren't being too evangelical about these things, or just saying like everyone needs to go out and try everything, and then because of what happened, there was inherent disclaimers built into the film without like needing to have the message of like be careful. Like most people watch that like, what the fuck? So that worked out, I guess.
Can I speak real quick to what Laura's
Yeah.
saying though as well though? That at least as I'm understanding, I didn't really make that connection either until watching the film this time. That the clandestine nature of the ayahuasca and set and setting is hugely important. It's all so much of it. It's subconscious. You don't even know it's, and so to be in an underground illegal psychedelic service, I'm not saying that's what sent him off, but that's a major factor in your set and setting. Even just think back to when you were smoking weed and you had to hide, the intensity of the paranoia from having to be like all secretive about your weed. Whereas now, if you're like, yeah, I'm smoking weed, you don't get that paranoia. So that's how I interpret your question. And I think there is a ton of value in working with psychedelics in an honest, open, upfront, really supported way.
Yeah, I mean, it's even just like the people's expectations of like a visual experience during the month. It's like if you talk to someone that hasn't done psychedelics before and they're like, well, I wonder what these visuals are going to be like, and that's like such a trivial part, I would say, of any of the actual like meaningful aspects of the psychedelic experience. And so much of that is just cultural and expectation. So yeah, there's something else I was going to say about that, but
How did your sleep play into it? In the video, you said something about that felt like it kicked you off.
oh yeah, not sleeping is so important. It turns out, like really, really important. I actually like we didn't get all into it. I didn't sleep for like weeks and weeks and weeks, even after I got all that even after we like when we were filming some of the scenes and everything with the psychiatrist afterwards and all that. Like I was tripping all day, every day for a pretty long time afterwards.
0 hours or 2 hours?
Like 1 or 2 hours, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was getting out of, I would fall asleep, and I would, you know, when like, you know, in like the martial art films, when someone's knocked over and then they flip up from their back onto their feet, I would wake up like that, like multiple times. I woke up like that, like convinced that some like alien was like invading my brain or something, and I needed to shake it out. It was, things were getting pretty wild there. Yeah.
I had a question. There's a moment in the film where you talk about your relationship and exercise and alcohol. So what does that look like for you now? Are you still on that path?
For the most part, nutrition, no. Exercise is so hard when I'm touring really intensely. So when I have breaks, I exercise more. Alcohol, I take long breaks and then I get back into it a little bit, and then I take long breaks. And so I do like a 2 month on, or no, I do like a 2 week on, 2 month off with alcohol. And I don't know, like, you know, at the time that we ended that, like, honestly, there's so many aspects of how it was how it was edited that like isn't didn't like exactly represent me or my sensibilities, and that's because the editor and director, he didn't have much psychedelic experience himself, and he had only made one documentary before, and he was a good editor, but like there's so many things that are like, well, I certainly wouldn't have played, like there's like, oh, the music's a little cheesy, or if I need to see one more scene of me slow motion walking with some heartfelt this and that, I'm gonna fucking puke. And that's stuff that I would have like I definitely am just, I have like a lot of irreverence generally toward life, and which didn't fully come through in the film, and so like, you know, I was in like a pretty unstable state when we were like, how do we finish this thing, and shouldn't we have like a nice ending or what? I don't know. I don't think that there's. I don't think any of us are at risk of getting to some like finish line of in life, or in like in success. I did it. All right, I have it now. And yeah, it's just an ongoing thing. I don't smoke cigarettes. But you know, then I'll like, you know, pick up, like I've been having like a real nitrous year. You know, like I always got something going on, and I'm like, I don't like being normal for too long. Like something will always want to give.
Which I found comfort learning that an inclination toward altered states indicates higher levels of intelligence, right? We've been taught that wanting to get fucked up means you're like dumb or you're just wasted, but that's not the truth. We need more novelty.
No, I mean, I think there's perhaps value in that. You know, I think that is context dependent as well. I mean, I do think that being from Wisconsin, being from a city that has the most bars per capita in the entire United States, and has, what's that? Bars per capita, 370 some for a city of about 50,000 people. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And I mean, I think that I don't even think it's so much that alcohol is the problem. Certainly tobacco seems to be useful in some cultures, and it evolved along with like places that have higher spread of malaria. The men smoke because it's an insecticide, and there's all sorts of evolutionary reasons. So alcohol, I'm not sure falls into that category. Much like most things, it's like all of these things were like pretty safe when they are nuanced, or you know, you didn't come around them as often, and now we're good metabolizers of life. So a lot of things are concentrates now, and are probably doing things in too high of potencies and too regularly. Um, but um, but I think that a variety of experiences is is probably more important than anything. I've done enough DMT frequently enough to get bored with DMT, and that's crazy. I'm not there now. Now I'm scared of shit to smoke DMT, but you can habituate to pretty much anything. And I actually like for what I do and trying to like articulate these experiences and put them into shows. I actually like getting bored with the experience of a given substance, and I'll usually like pick one a year. I've had a good, I had a ketamine year recently. This year's been a nice nitrous year, and I usually like to do it enough to where I'm like, you know what, like it's not like those first experiences. Like, oh my god, what the fuck was that? And then after a while, you're like, okay, I know that trick, and there's some like. There's some truth in getting bored with things, but then I think that ideally having a lot of diversity in your toolkit, where it's like sometimes coffee can just be like, I drink way too much. Coffee's probably my biggest like addiction, and I'll sometimes go for a while without coffee, and then you have it again. It's like, oh my fucking god, this is the best thing in the entire world. And so it's like, it just depends on where you are on that day, and every single thing is like that. I don't think mushrooms or ayahuasca or DMT, I don't think you would ever find one and be like, well, that's it, it's gonna fix it for everyone all across the board, and that's all they're gonna need. Yeah, in the back.
Yeah, I had a bunch of questions, but I'll just pause it down to one. Either one of you can answer. How much does intention, or call it preconceived notions, impact your experiences? So, what if like if you want to find certain answers and then you go on a trip, like does it impact your experience? Versus you do it recreationally, does that impact?
I go back and forth. I used to be so hypersensitive. Like if I gave someone DMT for their first time, I'd be like, "Oh, you got to keep that beaker sterile, and then you don't influence them with sharing any of you. You just like tell them how to smoke it and leave it at that." And then I found that, yeah, I mean, I could sit here and talk about. I could do a course on DMT. Let's do like a 3-month course. We'll meet 3 times a week, and then you smoke DMT for the first time. It probably won't match what I talked about for a lot of people. And then also we are these hyper susceptible people that can be insanely influenced by placebos. I mean, I'm so fascinated. I kind of want my next tour to be about the placebo effect, and I actually think placebo is a dirty word for no reason. Which I actually think most of life is about finding a placebo that works for you. I think that there's a placebo effect in every single drug interaction, even if you're doing something like, say, DMT or ayahuasca or something, which is clearly like hey, whether someone just slipped to this in your drink and you're gonna have a fucking experience. But along with that, you take something like ayahuasca. Well, any therapist in the world would kill for anything that would get their patients to do a dieta for 3 weeks leading up to a thing, and like eat healthy and exercise and do all of these other things. So then you go and you do all of those things, then you fly to Peru or like Jamaica because you've like tried every other thing in the world. Like we saw so many people, and then you go all that way, and there's going to be something, like it could lead to disappointment, but it might make it work even better than if it was just like you hand someone mushroom and it's like go up to someone and be like, hey, you want these mushrooms? Like, sure, pop in. Like it might just have a very bigger and more influential effect if you had to go through a whole rigmarole to do that. And that's not to negate the actual like physiological, neurological change or whatever. It's just that the environment and what led up to it is just. I mean, I don't know how to predict it. I mean, the setting, the intention, and everything else. Like, I try that sometimes. I try it like often, but does it always work out that way? It's like you got to set an intention, and then you have to right after that drop every expectation for that intention. Because of the unpredictable nature of psychedelics, I really love the term non-specific amplifier for kind of categorizing this idea of psychedelics amplifying aspects of your inner world in kind of somewhat unpredictable and perhaps uncontrollable ways, but they are things that probably already are existing in your own subconscious mind that you just may not have access to normally.
Got a question from Jeremy here. Are you there, Jeremy? Been
Yeah,
patiently waiting.
can you hear me?
Oh, hold
Can
on.
you hear me?
Hey, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
He's talking, but I can't
Can you
hear
hear me?
you. Okay. I'm just going to ask your question. Jeremy asks, Shane, after having experienced psychedelics in every form, how has it influenced your impression of the divine?
I mean, that's interesting. I mean, at least, I mean, I would say that I'm like as much of like an atheist as I've ever been, but at least I like understand. I mean, I'm almost more skeptical of some aspects of spirituality because of psychedelics, but at the same time, like a DMT experience and like there's mushroom experiences where it's like I don't know how to categorize this thing, but it's like you're gonna have something that like if you're just reporting it in the experience, someone's gonna be like, they just had a mystical or spiritual experience. Has it changed my interpretation? I mean, I've had things like DMT make me go like, oh, what if? Like more than anything else. But no, I don't know. I mean, I guess psychedelics, they don't just like open your mind or make you tap into this and that space. They can also just validate some of your own shit that you already believe and make you confirm it in like a way that's like, no, I actually saw it. I always thought that was what was really special about DMT. It was, as an atheist, I'd be like, well, just you know, I'm for making things falsifiable and testable, and so you know, like show me the thing and I'll believe it. And then you smoke DMT. I'm like, well, I saw the thing. I saw it. I still go like, I don't know, you know, afterwards. I guess I have a strong, I think at least it's just fun for me to come up with science-y or testable-ish explanations for why you would have a spiritual experience in that context. But like also, if I smoked DMT right now, I'd be like, oh, I just saw fucking God, sorry, forget everything I just said. So I don't know. I have it's complicated relationship with the divine.
I'm afraid that mind under matter. Do you have plans to bring that back this year? Or,
I'm bringing Here We Are back in January, and then and that's already been pushed back months and months. And I'm already like trying to get that going again. I'm like, how? Because I know I used to tour at least as hard as I do now, if not harder, and I'm getting older or something. But I'm like, how did I record a podcast every week, like prep and do research and stuff and book a guest? How do I do that every single week on top of all of the other things and I'm like trying to ramp myself up to do it again during COVID because of like the ease of remote, you know, like Zoom and type podcasts and stuff. It was easy enough to add video, which I never had before. And so now like I used to go to professors in person and set up the equipment. That just adds a whole nother layer of complexity. So that's enough of an undertaking for now. If Ramin calls me tomorrow and is like, let's get the band back together, I'd be like, all right, I'll record an episode. We just dumped a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into that show for a lot of like, you know, financial burden and heartbreak and all of that. So, you know, how dreams go.
follow up to that, Bruce, if I could. Are you mad about the Allie Ward's almost identical podcast coming up right behind you? Apologies.
Oh, no. I mean, I know of the podcast. I've never listened to it myself, but no, I hope someone does a better job of getting science out there to people than I was able to.
I would say that that's one of the things I love most about working with Shane over the years is that I can't think of ever seeing you disparage another comedian or someone who's kind of in the same realm as you. I've always appreciated that you seem to encourage everybody along.
Well, comedians are a bunch of degenerate fucks. That's not his words, but you just get used to it. Yeah.
So you said it's a nitrous here. It is for me as well.
Oh, yeah. You've heard you've been called to the sweet whisper of Mother Nitrous.
I go.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite about nitrous? And mine's the synchronicities that I see whenever I do it.
Oh, I don't have synchronicities. The first time that I did nitrous was in Louisville in a float tank. Weightless float, actually. Also, that's the first place I did mushrooms in a float tank. Was at that same place I went through today. Let's see. I remember shortly after that experimenting with nitrous a little bit, having like almost like a 2-second long DMT experience or something. And then like last year, I found out you can just like get nitrous on Amazon.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, that's like a fun party favor. It's not something I do a lot. It'll like fuck with like your vitamin D, this and that, circulation. You can't do it often. Oh, I wish we had nitrous right now. I'd be making balloons for everyone and passing them around. Yeah, no, I definitely, I'm not closeted about anything in life that I can think of. I'm a pretty open book. But yeah, I mean, I find it to be a lovely social thing that like seems to make you sort of dumb at a certain point if you use it too often or too many like days in a row. I just think it's like a really nice like you know, this is how I think you should use drugs. I've never tried this, but this is this is what I think this could actually work. As you go like you mark your calendar and you go like, hey, the 23rd of each month, that's nitrous day, and then you have it to look forward to, and you don't like you don't like abuse it or whatever in the meantime, and you do that with like a lot of a variety of substances where you mark off like one day of the week, or where you have this like routine of a thing. Most people just do that with alcohol. They're just like, can't wait for the weekend, and they get blackout drunk. But what if instead you did like nitrous on one of those days, mushrooms on another one of those days, and ketamine on a different one of those days, and you're having like, you know, one experience a week or something like that, and you know, spread out over like say 12 different substances or something. There's something about that I would love to try out. Maybe that's my goal for next year. Is once a week.
See those little Christmas calendars where you
yeah, you have something to look forward to, and you plan it, you do a whole thing. I don't know, because it's also then you'd have to like deal with it. It's like, well, we committed to Ibogaine today. I know it might not seem like the right time, but gosh darn it. But it's something like that. But also, it's weird to tell. Like the reward system in the brain is so strange. It's like the way it habituates. You kind of need to be changing things. You know, like they talk about with muscles or exercise or whatever else to like keep your muscles guessing. And I think it's probably a similar thing with drug use.
What question I got?
Like I do about 5 to 6 Adderalls a year. Ah, what a great number of Adderalls to do. And every time I do it, I'm like, no, I don't care for this. But it's getting me through this 10-hour drive or whatever that I have to do. And so, but like if I was doing Adderall habitually, I'd be like, either it would be like feeling problematic, or I would, I would question that behavior in myself if I was doing it. And I understand how I got there, but and alcohol's been like that for me at many times in my life. What were you gonna say?
The movie you said, the way that I interpreted what you said about LSD is that you thought that it should only be done in a kind of a clinical or therapeutic setting.
Did I say that?
No, that's how I understood. And I'm just kind of curious about why that would be specific, or what your perspective is. Because you said last night it lasts too long. I'm always like, it just doesn't last long enough. But
really,
I love the direction. Give me more, please. But I'm just curious as to kind of what I interpret there. What are your thoughts on LSD? And how
I mean, LSD feels way too normal to me. Like everyone's a little different. Sorry, I cut you off. So I was ask at the end if I missed something. For me, and people find this, but like mushrooms will really like send me off on a trip. LSD LSD is always, it just like feels like, I don't know. It just feels like reality, like heightened a little bit. I just find myself like doing chores and shit. I have like, like some, you know, like some of my greatest LSD trips are like, I do LSD, kind of bored with it, decide I'm gonna like go to Home Depot and get some stuff to fix the house that I've been putting off for a while, and then like fix things while I'm on LSD. I do like lots of filing and things like that on LSD. I do the most boring. Well, I also have this idea of like, because LSD is so long, whenever I'm on LSD, I seem to have this idea of going like, oh, if I can integrate whatever behavior I want to change into my life, if I start acting on that now with all this neuroplasticity, I'll do it in my regular life. So now I'm just on acid trying to like clean more. Do push-ups and stuff.
We have very different approaches to LSD.
Everyone has different approaches. That's my approach. It's so weird. I don't admit, like, no one does LSD the way that I do. It turns out. So I mean, I don't think that my assessment of it is representative. Yeah, it was her. Yeah.
Experiences of multiple drugs at the same time, and you take shrooms and then smoke them.
I usually do. I usually when I do mushrooms now, I do ketamine right at the same time, and because thanks for coming, by the way. Sorry to cut this spiel short earlier, but thanks for what you do. I like to. I don't like the first part of the mushroom experience, and so I like to just skip right over that with a nice ketamine K-hole for an hour, and then come out of it and have a mushroom experience. I think that 2CB. 2CB, I'd like to experiment with some. 2CB seems to go really well with nitrous. And yeah, combining things. I don't know. I'm always so like speaking of like set and setting, a lot of set and setting is your internal world. And so because like I have a show that like, you know, I need to explain a particular substance. It's always, there's always like something in me that wants to like, you know, if I'm doing LSD, I want to like figure out like, okay, what is this like to people? So even though I've had lovely experiences with say LSD and MDA, I don't mix that often. Yeah, I don't like mixing too much. Thanks so much for coming. Appreciate it, guys. We will stay up here until every one of you leaves. You think you can outlast us? No, I take that as a challenge. This is like one of those when I was a kid, they'd have like you'd win the car if you could like be the last one touching it. It's like this, but for hyperspace. Yeah, no, that's a good. It was much too short. It was like 3 months. Oh, there's a whole. There was so much we don't show in the documentary. Like I was eating mushrooms every other day, and like pretty high doses, and then I was doing I was doing a lot of I was trying to like stay in the psychedelic space for as long as I could to like articulate. There's a lot of, we didn't know what the documentary was, so I was like, I'll just keep tripping till I figure out what this fucking thing's supposed to be about.
Stop one and go like, one, do a bunch of that, go back on mushroom.
It was mostly mushrooms, honestly, but yeah, I would do like MDMA. Like I still have never written any good like MDMA material, and so I've like ketamine too. Ketamine's been a harder-ish one to write material about. I finally have some decent stuff now. I did a little bit last night. So that was I nearly broke my nose trying to write ketamine material. My goodness. I went on a real streak of like God knows what I was there. The morning after anyway. Oh, really? I was like, oh, no, I mean, I almost blew out my sinuses snorting ketamine to try to like write a ketamine joke. I couldn't force it out of there. And then eventually I came up with it. And so MDMA is one that like, man, like 2CB, I've only done 4 times, and I have like a solid, thank you guys. I have a solid like 45 minutes. I have like a whole show about 2CB all built up. I've done 5-MeO DMT I did it 3 times one day, like a microdose, a medium dose, and a big dose one day, and then I did one extra large dose one other day. That's how little I've done 5-MeO, and I have a real chunk of material, and I feel like it can certainly be like a chapter of a book. There's something about MDMA that like I don't know. I just like never come up with. I think that there's something about like cynical, irreverent, dry nature that like MDMA is too like lovey-dovey or something like that for me to write like a cutting like edge about that has some light to it. And so thanks so much for coming, guys. And so it was a lot of fun. But it was mostly mushrooms during that time. But it also wasn't just psychedelics. There's a lot of things that happened. There's like a lot of like my marketing. This is 2017. My section of my marketing is dependent on social ads, which when Trump took office, social medias, that's when they started like cracking down on certain things, and within the algorithms, drugs started getting swept up in that too, and so suddenly having sold out shows everywhere, like to refigure how I was marketing things, and so that was like kind of pulled the rug out from under me at the same time the documentary was coming. And then there's like Universal Studios, it's like giving me this project hosting this show about psychedelics. It was like there's a lot of like scary, anxious, and like huge, like grandiose things happening all at the same time. You combine that shit with a bunch of mushrooms, and it'll like get to your head in a way that it might not otherwise. You're just gobbling mushrooms, working like a factory job or whatever, which is what I used to do. I think one of the big takeaways for me from the whole thing is how safe psychedelics are. I mean, you absolutely pushed it to the floor for as long as anybody that I can imagine possibly could, and you recover pretty quickly. Huh? Yeah. I mean, think of it. Recover. What's ironic is this is like a COVID thing. I started like this web series at the beginning of COVID that was like about how I was like stuck in a place and couldn't go. It was a silly thing where it was like it wouldn't make sense for the continuity of it to shave or cut my hair. And then I didn't realize I could grow a beard and stuff, and then I just kept it going just because. So, it was the least amount of psychedelics that I ever did was in the first year of COVID. So it's like the most psychedelic I ever looked during the time when I was doing the least amount of psychedelics I ever had. All right, so it's just, it's us against you, wait. We need to leave, Eric. Let these people go. Thank you guys so much for coming. Thanks, everybody. All right, those on the virtual world, thanks for joining.